David, you have a very interesting background. I'd first like to let people know that the snapshot is that you began your public defendership, I guess you'd say, in Kansas.
Yes.
There was a road that you took to get there that I want you to talk about that. But then you worked as for a civil litigation firm, and then you came to Linn County, and from 2000 to 2002, you were deputy district attorney, and then you came here in 2003, which you're in that similar position.
Yes,
right?
I'm a deputy district attorney.
Now, the only interesting thing that I found in your bio is that, well, not the only thing, but one thing that's very interesting. Your road to getting to Kansas, Dorothy clicked her heels 3 times and she got there, but you took it from going from Israel to Kansas. Give us the brief background of why you were in Israel and what you were doing there.
Well, I started off in Kansas. I was actually born in Nashville, but grew up in Kansas. And when I was between 5 and 6 years old, my parents got into a very long, bitter, and ugly divorce case that ended up with my father getting custody over myself and my sister. As I said, it was a bitter divorce case. I was brought into court. I remember speaking to a judge, even at age 6, they brought me in. At that time, fathers usually didn't get custody, but somehow he did. He then remarried to an Israeli woman. And I did not have a good relationship with her. And when I was 13, they told me that I couldn't live in the home anymore.
And you were in Kansas at that point?
I was in Kansas,
okay.
Overland Park, Kansas. It's a suburb of Kansas City. They told me I can't live in the home anymore, and they were sending me off to a boarding school type of institution that my stepmother, knew of in Israel.
In Israel. Wow. That's a long ways away.
Terrified me. I was from Overland Park, Kansas. Israel sounded like a pretty scary place to go to. And I actually told them I wasn't going to do it, and it turned out that I did.
But you got there, and the short story is you ended up serving in the military there.
So I was in there, I was in the boarding school, and when I was 18, I got a draft notice. I went to the U.S. Embassy and said, hey, what can I do about this? They told me, when you're in a country, you're subject to their laws. If their laws say that you can be drafted, you can. And they also told me, but while you're here, you must register for the U.S. Selective Service System.
Wow.
So I registered for the U.S. Selective Service System and then was put in the IDF.
Okay, so the question I have for you, do you know Hebrew then?
I can speak Hebrew, yes.
That's amazing, because being in the military, you'd have to communicate.
I ended up being a first sergeant, actually, in an airborne infantry unit.
Okay, now, since then, because we've only got a little while, and I want to find out what you want to do should you become judge, you got back over here. In the last 5 years, you've been assigned to child abuse prosecution at this point. I mean, this is quite, normally prosecutors and attorneys don't have a background of being in the Israeli military, so I have no idea how that would help in the judgeship at all, but it's an interesting, fascinating world background that you got from that.
Yes. Well, I mean, you learn a lot in the military about human beings. You learn a lot, especially when I was sent literally to the front lines. I was sent up to Lebanon, and I was up in what is now Syria, on the actual very front lines with the Syrians.
So what's in the news today, you can relate to those locations.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I very much can. And in those situations, you learn a great deal about human nature. In any event, so yes, I've been a child abuse prosecutor for the last 5 years. That is kind of a grim job, but I feel a sort of calling to it. There's more of it going on than we would like to imagine. There simply is.
Yeah, the trends are that way. Now, okay, we see a lot of people who are lawyers who want to become judges. The concerns you have right now for being a judge and why you want to be a judge would be summarized how?
There is what you might call a political stranglehold by the other 2 branches of government. You know, we have 3 branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. I've always viewed the judiciary as the one that protects us from the legislative and the executive.
Oh, no, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Okay.
Right, your freedoms and your liberties are dependent on the judiciary.
Sure.
So you don't want the other 2, you don't want politicians meddling with that branch. And I never knew that that was occurring in Jackson County until about 1.5 years ago, when 2 judges resigned, Judge White and Judge Shively, at the same time. Now, there's a provision in the law that says if a judge for some reason can't fulfill his term, become sick or ill or injured, death, anything, then the governor steps in and appoints a replacement.
Sure.
And that's supposed to be for that unusual circumstance when a person who was elected to be judge can't complete their term. So I thought it a bit odd that in the end of 2010, suddenly 2 of them at the same time couldn't complete their terms, but be that as it may, I applied to the governor then appoints judges, so I applied, as did many others. And when I saw the people that made the list to be interviewed, I was astounded. It became very clear that it was not a what you know, but who you know. The person I'm running against, Ben Bloom, was appointed last year to the bench without ever having done a criminal jury trial in his career.
And actually, anybody can be appointed a judge without a legal background, right? I mean, technically?
Well, no, I think you have to be a lawyer, but you don't have to know anything. I mean, the governor can appoint his brother, and he doesn't. There's no process. There's no transparent process that has to be followed. Okay. So he can just call up his brother, if his brother's a lawyer, and say, hey, guess what, you're the next judge. There's no, in federal court, you see here, not federal court, in federal judicial nominations, you see Senate hearings where the candidates are questioned and asked about their qualifications. In Oregon, we have nothing like that. So I looked in a little further, and I found that almost all of our judges got to the bench that way.
Through appointment?
Yes. And I thought, how could that be? If you think about it, we have 3 county commissioners, right? There's 9 circuit court judges. You'd think you would see circuit court judge elections at a rate 3 times higher than circuit court judges, but you don't. There seems to be some kind of unwritten rule that judges, when they reach the end of their career, they do not finish that last term. Instead, they resign just a couple of months early,
and then an appointment
allowing an appointment to be made. And the problem is, when I'm talking about a political stranglehold, when that appointee takes the bench, that's it. They are very rarely challenged. We know of, in my research, going back for a few decades, I could find no instance in which one of those political appointees was defeated. I found 1 challenge and no instance in which one was defeated. Because when that person takes office, as my opponent did, they have incredible power. They are the judge. They can call up the attorneys and say, hey, you're going to endorse me, right? And who's not? If you've got a hearing in front of the judge the next day, and the judge calls you up and says, hey, you're going to endorse me publicly, aren't you? What are you going to say?
Yeah.
So, and it's not just those endorsements from the attorneys, but all the local politicians. And so there's something very interesting here that you see. He lists in his voter pamphlet statement basically all of his endorsements, and he lists Sal Esquivel alongside Alan Bates. Now, when do Sal Esquivel and Alan Bates see eye to eye on issues? Is that
apparently in that one?
Apparently in that one. And why is that? Is it because he's such an incredible guy that nobody could disagree that he's not the right man for the job? That would be very interesting, since we see for the Supreme Court, when you see hearings, you always have half of the Senate disagreeing. Yeah. But here, the reason is that they know he's the shoe-in. And so all the politicians want to have said, yes, I endorse you, give them political campaign donations so that they're in his good graces when he continues his job.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we've only got a couple minutes here. So what if you become a judge, what would you like to bring to the office that perhaps isn't there now?
Well, the 2 most common cases in court are criminal cases and child custody cases. With regard to criminal cases, I've got the experience of years being a public defender. I started 18 years ago as a public defender, did that for 3 years. I've been prosecuting child abuse cases and other criminal cases for many, many years. My opponent has none of that. He did, I think, as a legal intern in law school, some petty offense criminal prosecution, never a jury trial. With regards to child custody, I have felt that on my person. I have seen what the incorrect decision in a child custody case means. And being up there doing that job would be different for me than for somebody who has not been involved in that and been the subject matter of that case. Also, there is something much larger than that that I think would be accomplished if I were elected. I am not taking, and I have announced publicly, I will not take campaign contributions from lawyers, law firms, or from any other source. And if I can win doing it that way, that will shake up the system. I mean, if I win at all, that will shake up the system because it'll be the first time we know of one of the governor's appointees being defeated. But when I'm asked, well, David, how did you win? I'll say, because on judicial, you don't need to remember, it's position 7, but there's only one judicial election on your ballot that's local. I mean, there's some appellate ones, but locally there's just one.
Okay.
So,
well, thanks for being with us. Good luck.
All right. Thank you very much.